Imagine this. Last year, your favorite coffee cost $3. Today, you step into the same cafe, order the same drink, and it costs $5. You double-check the receipt, but there's no mistake. What changed? Did the coffee beans suddenly become more expensive? Or is something else going on? This is where inflation comes into the picture. Inflation is one of the most talked about concepts in economics, yet it remains misunderstood by many. It's not just about rising prices. It's about what those rising prices mean for your money, your lifestyle, and your future. Whether it's the cost of groceries, rent, or even a vacation, inflation quietly shapes every financial decision we make. In this video, we're going to unravel the mystery of inflation. What is it? Why does it happen? And most importantly, how does it affect you? By the end, you'll not only understand inflation, but also feel empowered to navigate its impact with confidence. Let's dive into the details. Inflation, in its simplest terms, is the rate at which prices for goods and services increase over time. It's the reason why a movie ticket that cost $1.50 in the 1970s might cost $15 today. But inflation isn't just about higher prices. It's also about what happens to the value of your money. As prices rise, the purchasing power of a single dollar decreases, meaning your money buys less than it did before. Let's break it down with an example. Imagine you have $100, and last year it could buy you a week's worth of groceries. This year, those same groceries cost $110, but your paycheck hasn't increased. That extra $10, that's the impact of inflation on your purchasing power. Now, you might wonder, what causes inflation? To answer that, we need to explore the forces that drive it, starting with supply and demand. Inflation often occurs when demand outpaces supply. Picture a concert where tickets are limited but everyone wants to attend. As demand surges, prices soar. This is known as demand pull inflation, where rising demand drives up prices. For instance, during economic booms, when consumers and businesses are spending more, demand for goods and services can outstrip supply, leading to inflation. On the other hand, there's cost-push inflation. This happens when the cost of producing goods increases and businesses pass those higher costs on to consumers. A real-world example is the rising price of oil. When oil prices go up, transportation and production costs rise, which affects everything from the price of gas to the cost of groceries. But inflation isn't just about these simple mechanics. It's deeply tied to monetary policy and the money supply. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the United States, play a critical role in managing inflation. When the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, borrowing becomes cheaper. This encourages spending and investment, which can stimulate economic growth. However, if too much money is pumped into the economy, it can lead to inflation. It's like adding too much water to a soup. It dilutes the flavor. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, governments around the world implemented stimulus measures to keep their economies afloat. While these actions were necessary, they also increased the money supply significantly, contributing to inflationary pressures. Managing this balance is one of the biggest challenges for central banks as they aim to maintain steady growth without letting inflation spiral out of control. But what does all of this mean for you? Let's look at how inflation impacts your everyday life. Inflation doesn't just affect the prices of goods, it shapes how we live. Think about your rent. If inflation rises, landlords may increase rents to keep up with the higher costs of property, maintenance, and taxes. Groceries, gas, and healthcare costs might all creep up, making it harder for you to stick to your budget. For savers, inflation can feel like an invisible thief. Imagine you have $10,000 in a savings account earning 1% interest annually. If inflation is at 3%, your money's real value decreases by 2% each year, even though the number in your account stays the same. This is why investing becomes so important during times of inflation. It helps your money grow faster than inflation can erode it. But inflation doesn't just challenge individuals. It also affects businesses, investments, and the broader economy. When inflation rises, businesses often face higher costs for materials, labor, and transportation. To maintain profitability, they may increase prices, cut costs, or even delay expansion plans. For example, a restaurant may need to raise menu prices when ingredient costs soar, but doing so risks losing customers who are already struggling with their own rising expenses. Inflation also impacts investments. The stock market, for instance, can become volatile as investors worry about how inflation will affect corporate profits. Bonds, often seen as safer investments, may lose value when inflation rises, as their fixed returns become less attractive compared to rising costs elsewhere. And on a global scale, inflation affects trade and competitiveness. If a country experiences higher inflation than its trading partners, its exports may become more expensive, reducing demand from international buyers. This can weaken the economy further, creating a vicious cycle. Despite its challenges, inflation isn't always a bad thing. A moderate level of inflation, around 2%, is actually considered healthy for an economy. It encourages spending and investment, as people are less likely to hoard money if they know its value will decrease over time. For example, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, deflation, when prices fall, caused widespread economic stagnation. People stopped spending, businesses collapsed, and unemployment soared. Inflation, when managed properly, helps prevent such economic disasters by keeping money circulating and the economy growing. Understanding inflation isn't just about economics. It's about taking control of your financial future. Inflation might seem like an abstract concept, but its effects are anything but. It touches every part of our lives, from the prices we pay at the store to the decisions we make about saving and investing. By understanding what inflation is and how it works, you can take steps to protect yourself and make informed financial decisions, whether it's budgeting wisely, diversifying your investments, or staying ahead of rising costs. But inflation doesn't exist in isolation. It's deeply connected to another fundamental concept in economics: supply and demand. To truly grasp how inflation works, you need to understand the forces behind it. Curious about what drives supply and demand and how they shape our economy? Click on the next video right here, and let's continue this fascinating journey into the world of economics. See you there.